Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Balance Fireside chat for Update 215, which is live now. You can go out there and play it. You can check out the patch notes. You can follow along as I pick this gentleman's brain.
Hello, hello.
Jason.
I'm Jason. I'm leading balance on Company of Heroes 3.
And I'm John. I'm the lead community manager here at Relic Entertainment. So, Jason, we just put out this multiplayer balance patch. I'm excited about this one because, in our roadmap that we put out however many months ago, I don't think this was on there.
No, it wasn't.
So not that this wasn't planned, but I think this was kind of like can we do this? Can we not? But I'm glad that we were able to do sort of a mid patch to tide folks over before we get to 2-2 later this fall. So let's maybe start big picture. Why did you want to do 215?
Yeah. So 215 in our is a bit of a patch of opportunity in a way.
Okay.
There were quite a few different changes that we thought would improve the game, and we found like a decent collection that we could put together that we could test early and then get done early and then get it out in the form of this patch. We also have a little bit more support now with some of the playtesters that we have, which is allowing us to essentially validate that these changes are good much sooner, which is allowing us to do things like this.
Okay.
Though, again, this was a bit of a opportunistic thing. I don't know how consistently we can get this stuff out, but at the same time, we're going to try our best.
Okay, excellent. So, do we want to talk about some of the actually, I think the first thing I'll mention is I was really glad that we were able to take the auto match cooldown penalty off of the 1v1 mode. I know that was a bit of a pain point since we rolled that system out, but now if you're playing 1v1, you can just safely quit out of any match without suffering any sort of penalty at any given point. You don't have to use the vote to surrender system. That was just sort of like, we knew when we rolled that system out, we were just like, okay, this is a behavior we don't want, but we didn't necessarily have the time or the resources to implement that the way we should have. I think there was like some tech issues there, but we were finally able to get to that. And now in 1v1s, you can rage quit to your heart's content. Yeah, glad to roll out that quality of life change. But obviously, there's a few other bug fixes as well, but the bulk of this was multiplayer balance. So,
Yes.
where do you want to start? Do you want to start with just sort of the more general changes?
Yeah, we can kind of start running through the notes. I believe the notes are already out and
Yep.
everyone can already see them, so I guess they can follow along. But probably in terms of general, the kind of thought was for this patch, we wanted to target some of the high level, like really prominent and dominant strategies this time. So in some ways, this is a bit of a defensive patch where we're taking some of the clearly overperforming units and abilities and we're reducing them. Generally, we like to do more of a balance of like improving things that aren't used that much and then reducing the strength of things that are being overly used. But kind of with the nature of these smaller patches, we don't really have the bandwidth to do those kind of sweeping changes because it's really hard to make sure that, hey, if you do both the buffs and the nerfs, you're not just creating a new problem, essentially. So with these smaller patches, I think this is kind of the general expectation of like, we're going to be looking at what's kind of dominant and what's kind of being oppressing the meta, and then we're going to kind of reduce those in power and let other things take in. While in our more general major patches, we're going to be focusing more on like larger sweeping changes. And we'll talk about some of them as we touch on some of the things here, because there were some changes that we wanted to do in this patch that were just either too unsafe or just too large in bandwidth for us to really execute on a small patch like this.
Yeah, yeah.
So kind of getting into it. One of the changes we've been doing quite a lot, or one of the systems we've been changing quite a lot this year was the defenses. We've wanted players to use them more, and I think we were quite successful in that, at least in the last patch, to the degree where it's probably too prominent. Now that players are getting much better at using these things, we're noticing that their build times are too high. Now, one of the problems that we have identified with this is destroying defenses is actually too clunky and too difficult, especially large sandbag walls or mixed wire and tank trap walls. It takes at the most a lot of micro and it's quite tedious. In the worst case, you don't actually have the tools at the time you need to deal with them. And we want to address these in the future, but for now, that's kind of out of the scope, again, of one of these smaller patches. So what we're doing is we are currently just reducing, we're bringing back some of the buffs we originally gave to them. They'll take longer to build. And this is live. I don't know if we've actually mentioned this.
We didn't say that up top, but
Kind of Ren. Sorry, I just completely butchered that name.
Yeah. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll jump on any ones that are relevant to what we're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. And another general change is the radio recon or the signal detection range is being reduced. We introduced the change where they now reveal their positions, but essentially what we've noticed is that even despite that, with the massive range that they have, A, it's just so much control of the map, but B, even if you can see it, the range is so far that most units can't even really deal with it. So we're toning it down a little. So that's it for the general changes. We can kind of get into the US changes. US kind of has been fairly dominant in the 1v1 meta. They've really kind of set the pace and determined what everyone else kind of can or cannot do. And a large part of this is essentially their scout builds, and to a lesser extent, the strength of the AT in tier 2.
Mm-hmm.
So we are addressing both of these essentially. It's funny because I don't think we've buffed scouts that much in the last year or so, but players have really, really figured out how to make these things really good, and they've really gotten their money's worth out of it. And it's reflecting in both win rates and in terms of meta. So what we're doing is we're giving a few minor nerfs to both the scaling, the veterancy requirements, and the cost of the scout. And this would apply to the base scout. And then both the RD Observer and the Pathfinder essentially are being standardized because the Pathfinder got a few nerfs in the previous patch that we didn't really move over.
I guess that's always a bit of a tricky thing to balance. Is like, how do you have these specialist units that don't become, so like they can do everything, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then you build more than, I think like in terms of like design intent, you'd have like one or two of these units, but if you mass build them, all of a sudden they can become a problem, especially in the early game. So I guess like there's a fine tuning, fine balance between that and not having them sort of veer too far into like mainline territory. And it's just like, well, I'm just going to not build riflemen because the area observers are doing it for me.
And this is kind of a larger topic that we've noticed as like an issue right now across the game. I think this is quite noticeable in team game modes as well, where the presence of mainline infantry just isn't that much, which in some ways reduces the impact of mainline infantry, because if people aren't building infantry, you have less of a need for that combat infantry. And then because of that, like a lot of our games are ending up being like support units with AT units versus anti-infantry vehicles. This is something that's quite difficult for us to shift that quickly in like a small patch like this. We are nerfing some key units in that regard, but we will be like looking at this more. We'll see how much this patch shifts that, and then we're going to be aiming to kind of improve the essentially the presence of mainline infantry, riflemen being a good example, as we get into the future.
Okay. Is that like a 2-2 thing, or is that like early 2026?
That's probably a 2-2 thing, but with like these large overarching meta shifts, it's very hard for us to get an exact thumb on like this is exactly where people will go.
Right. Okay.
We're going to move in that direction, and we'll see how it goes, because we obviously don't want to go in the opposite direction where everyone just builds infantry and spams infantry, and then all of a sudden all the vehicles are useless.
Yep.
So
okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So the next kind of segueing into that is the rifleman. So where the rifleman currently is basically hard countered by a lot of good and efficient counters that the Axis don't really need to go out of their way for either. So a lot of these things are just making the riflemen just not have a role, let alone the fact that they're a little weak as well. So for now, for this patch, we're just reducing their veterancy requirements, which should improve kind of their scaling timings a bit, which will help. And then obviously a lot of their counters will be getting some nerfs in this patch as well. But we don't think this will fully bring the rifleman to where we want it to be. So we'll be doing more changes when we get to 2-2.
Okay.
The Jeep is kind of in the same story where like this unit is being held back by the fact that the way armor company works, or sorry, not company, armor battle group works. So we're making some minor adjustments right now, or more like a bug fix, where their Venercy wasn't actually working correctly. But essentially this ends up being a buff to the unit where your Vet 2 timing and Vet 3 timing is significantly faster. So yeah.
Bazookas.
Yeah, so the other major change to US is essentially both their bazooka team and their half tracks are getting slight nerfs. The bazooka team we've noticed is people have really figured out how to use the ability. It's funny because when we launched it, in some ways, or I forget the exact numbers now, but it was quite strong. But people didn't use it that much.
Yeah.
Now people have really figured out how to make the most of the bazooka teams, and we're noticing they're just too good in all situations. They're meant to be a little less effective when assaulting or like directly pushing heavy armor from the front, but because they have such low veterancy requirements, they're getting to their very powerful vet bonuses way too early and way too consistently, so they're able to just kind of deal with these. The other thing is we're noticing that like people are getting better with using them, so we need to improve the setup time on them as well, because it's very easy to hunt like vehicles with them, and we want to tone that back.
Okay.
So yeah, half tracks. Half tracks are getting quite a few changes, or some impactful changes. The light armor reduction for them is going to make it so that small arms do much more damage to them. And the main breakpoint that we're looking at is essentially making small arms into a snare more viable. Right now, we're noticing, especially in high-level play, you can kind of drive these vehicles into mainline infantry, do a bunch of damage, and they have to run away before they can really punish you. The idea with this is that we're making that less effective because it's much more risky, and getting that first snare off is going to be more easy. So that's kind of the changes. The 75 mil version of it is getting some light nerfs, where the long range penetration has been reduced slightly because we're noticing it's just too effective against higher tier units, and then getting some cost improvements now that it's more effective. So yeah.
Mortar pits.
Mortar pits and the DAC half track mortar have both gotten a little bit of nerfs. As we did the huge mortar change in the last patch, we've noticed the shift in power levels of a lot of the mortar units, and a lot of them just essentially need to be toned down.
Okay.
The DAC mortar in particular, we'll get to that later, but yeah, this one is one. Some further changes. We have some lighter changes to like some of the battle groups. Quality of life for supply drop. War Machine is getting nerfed by 1 CP for the kind of the problems we mentioned earlier, where like the vehicle spam is being a little too prominent. And then we're getting some light improvements for both the paratroopers and the resupply op. So,
okay.
Yeah.
The whiz bang. I saw a few comments about that saying like, well, why did you buff the whiz bang?
So in some ways, it definitely ends up being a buff, but this is meant to kind of fix some of the weird bugs this unit had.
Okay.
Like if you threw a smoke grenade in front of a whiz bang, it would essentially like increase the timing of the artillery by like a third. It would they would fire very slowly above it. So now the vehicle will consistently fire lower arc with the set speed. I do believe this will be faster. It's a little hard to exactly calculate just how much faster, but it will be noticeable. And this will just increase the consistency of the unit. We do know in some modes it can be quite like oppressive to play against, but we're going to keep an eye on this.
Okay. Before we move off the U.S. forces,
yeah, what's up?
I'm gonna turn my microphone on. So, Jason, I'm hearing from Twitch chat that you nerf the U.S. forces and they're unplayable in team games an hour after the patch is out. What's your response?
Oh, good. You're really putting me on the spot there. Okay. So yes, we have nerfed some of the key tier 2, which is kind of the meta strats of USF. The intention right now is that we are nerfing some of the key units that Axis use as well. We're going to get to them, but some key nerfs are like the DAC Mortar unit, the DAC Tiger, Wehrmacht's Wirbelwind got a minor nerf, and a few other things like the 221 as well. The idea is that by nerfing all of their key units, that despite having that reduction in power for USF, they'll still be able to keep up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So should we get into the Wehrmacht?
Yeah. All right. Wehrmacht is getting some key changes. some bigger than others. We're smoothing out their extreme early game a little by making both their Grenadier scale better and their Kit and Crowd build slightly faster. But we're kind of reducing in the other component, which is some of their mid-game builds, particularly the Luftwaffe tier, is a little too strong. So by nerfing that, we want to nerf that transition a little because the quick into Jaegers and Scout Car is a little too strong right now.
Right.
So the Scout Car, we gave some massive buffs in the last patch, mini patch, and we're kind of toning some of those back down. One of the major breakpoints is that it could two-shot the Humber pretty consistently with high accuracy and high speed, and that was really, really nasty. So we're reducing that. And then also we're increasing the cost of the heal slightly just so that that transition is slightly less sharp. So, yeah. We're currently aware that Wehrmacht has some weird issues in the early game. The challenge here is that the way it plays in the 1v1 scenario and the large team game scenario is quite different. So to find the proper changes to adjust both in the correct ways, we're going to spend more time on that.
Okay.
Yeah. We have some more minor changes to some of their Luftwaffe vehicles. The Martyr is actually having its veterancy reduced because we're noticing its scaling isn't quite appropriate for what it's doing, while the Whirlwind is having its armor just reduced by around 10%, which makes other light vehicles more effective against it. That's the main target. And also things like, it's just light vehicles. So something like a Greyhound or a Stuart will be more effective against it. The Stoßtruppen, we are aware in some ways is too strong. We are nerfing this unit in a few different ways. The big one is its vet ability is losing a lot of the received accuracy bonus. Okay, sorry, I misread that. The received accuracy bonus is getting reduced when it uses its shock assault ability. Right now, this ability essentially gives the unit a little bit too much. We've kind of stacked it too much in its favor, so we're reducing it. And also, the 2 columns that bring it in are getting nerfed.
Okay.
So the kind of jumping around a little, the mechanized half-track column version has had its cost pretty significantly increased. It used to have a discount when you got the 2 units together. It's kind of like a bundle discount. And we're like, but now that the Stoßtruppen is way stronger now, and I think the 251 is way better than when we originally made this ability, we no longer need this. So you're paying full price, but you're allowing to skip tech, essentially. And then for the other one, we haven't nerfed directly the Stug and the Stoßtruppen together. However, the Stug D is receiving a few minor nerfs to reduce the power of it. So that will indirectly make that strategy less effective. So, yeah.
Okay.
Kind of just going on here.
Yeah, for sure. Did you want to talk about the Panzer or get into the Fallschirm units?
Yeah, so some of the Wehrmacht units are getting slight increases. So this is the Panzer IV. This is the Fallschirm Pioneer. We currently essentially have a weird mix of some units are getting reload and cooldown, where some units are getting full attack speed reductions. We're slowly rolling that attack speed increase or change across the whole game. What that means is that now their aim time and their wind down and wind up are all being reduced consistently. And some units have this and some units don't. We're kind of rolling this over time because if we change it across the whole game, some units will benefit more, some units will benefit less. But players should perceive the change for Fallschirm Pioneers essentially as a minor buff. It increases the value of it. And then the Fallschirmjäger itself is getting some minor improvements. So it's being essentially, it used to be in a weird place between elite and advanced infantry, but now that the game has kind of settled a little bit, we've kind of determined that this unit falls more in the advanced infantry. Both them and the paratroopers have essentially settled in this range.
Right.
So the Fallschirmjäger's costs, reinforcement, and its veterancy requirements are all being reduced to match that. So yeah, and then now we're at the Stug changes, where essentially the Africa Corps and the Wehrmacht versions are getting some slight nerfs. Essentially, the Vet 2 was giving it armor on the sides as well, which made the unit very difficult to counter, even with the traditional counters you were supposed to do. So now we're rolling that back, and we're rolling down the lethality of the base unit.
Okay. Do we want to talk about any of the stuff for the battle groups, or just move on?
I think the main one that people will notice will be the breakthrough change.
Yeah.
We've pretty significantly reduced its power by increasing its cost by around 50%, and then we've also reduced its duration by, I forget the percentage, but
Okay.
by around 15 seconds. So that's kind of what we're kind of doing.
Okay. Before we move on to the British, we can answer a couple questions from the chat.
Sure.
I saw one earlier that was like higher tightrope, and we like tightrope. We love tightrope. We love his videos. We've worked with him a lot privately as well. I guess we can also publicly say here. You kind of alluded to it earlier, Jason, but we're actually working with Dumet and Faragi. So those folks are now just directly working with the dev team. I don't know if you want to speak to like what they're actually doing.
Yeah, they're helping us both playtest and validate changes, essentially.
Okay.
Um,
And I hear they're okay at the game, like kind of.
Slightly, you
Yeah,
know. I
yeah.
hear like Faragi is kind of good,
Yeah.
a little bit,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I don't know. I sometimes see his name at the top of the leaderboard.
It's weird. Every time I open it up, he's just right there at the start. I don't know why that's the case, but yeah.
Yeah. Another good question. I think from Carlos and then Havoc as well, seconding it. Jason, this question's never going to go away. Collins. Tied to tech.
Yes.
So I know there's this ongoing debate about like,
Yes.
well, these very, very powerful units that, yes, they cost a ton of resources, but they allow you to skip sort of the more prohibitive cost of like actually
of the tech tree. Yeah.
teching into them naturally by like upgrading your buildings and abilities, etc. So I know there's one side of the argument that says like, hey, this is kind of like a cheat. It's a skip. It's too overpowered. It disrupts the natural flow of the game. And there's the other side of the argument where that's like, well, this is fun. This is exciting. It's part of the Company of Heroes sort of DNA to have these types of abilities and explosive
Careful
sort
there.
of sort of these explosive abilities and units to kind of hit the battlefield. So what's the current thinking with regard to Battlegroup Collins? Maybe more particularly like heavies.
Yeah, heavies. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that right now?
So
Set the record straight.
this is a little bit of a big topic,
Yeah.
or an enormous topic, really. So we can't really cover the full nuance, but kind of like the notes where we're at currently is we definitely know the heavy tank Collins are not in a good place. We've kind of changed a lot of the medium vehicle Collins over the game. So, for example, Brits have kind of lost theirs. Because we've identified, again, some Collins are good, but I don't think some Collins are bad, but we're not of the mind that we want to remove them altogether, or neither do we want to remove tech skipping altogether. The ability to essentially do a tech skip and to stall is a valuable, like, different strategy that can be done. Now, admittedly, there have been a lot of times, both in Co 2 and in Co 3, where the trade-offs weren't really there, right? You could just get best of all worlds, where you could get like a really, really powerful mid game, transition that immediately to a really strong late game, right? And that's why Collins were perceived as so toxic, rightfully so, I would say. Our current intention is essentially we don't want these, but we do want to preserve some ability for someone to make that bet of like, I'm going to go really heavy into mid game, and then I will have this really like late game insurance of like the heavy tank or like vehicle Colin. But we want to give a meaningful gap where a player who does the traditional tech path will have an advantage. That's kind of the way we currently see it.
Okay.
Now, it's to be seen how consistently we can execute on this.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't work, then we will be moving kind of more towards harder and harder to get Collins. But that's kind of what we want, because what we don't want to have end up happening is where the only strategy every game is to consistently tech through the tree in the same way.
Right.
Giving you different tech options and different ways to go through the tech options is very important to us.
So I think the counter argument to that then is a lot of folks will bring up Co 2 and
Yes.
some of the last community patches that we did for Co 2 kind of undid a lot of that work and really directly tied those call-ins to tech.
Just directly. Yeah.
Right. So I think that's the example that I see brought up frequently when we talk about like preserving that aspect of call-ins in Co 3. So again, does that go back to your answer about sort of maintaining that sort of strategy as viable for players?
So I will tread a little carefully because I haven't played that much of the most recent balance patch that Koto has been sitting on for a while. It's been a bit of a it's been a soft minute, but like the kind of the thing that we wanted to avoid that I think Code 2 demonstrates is essentially that escalator path that people are kind of forced to go through, where you go through the tech tree the same way every game, and you have essentially these one or two key units that you always get, and you almost always get just one of. You don't really adapt to the game state as much of like how many do I get or how long do I stay on a tier. Generally, especially the in between tiers, you kind of go through in a set order. So like we want to kind of avoid this, and we want to make sure that you always have the option of like, for example, always being like, I want to double down on lower tech rather than going up to higher tech. And we want to make sure this is like a viable strategy you can do. Now, admittedly, there have been times where that's always the best strategy. Like people have flashbacks to like armored dominance in the past, and this is something we don't want. To be very clear, like we don't want to make it so that you just spam one vehicle, play through the mid game, and win. So we are going to be addressing those strategies as they come up over time. But the intention is that we want some amount of variety in terms of your late game like builds, so that you can go really heavy. I don't know, for example, really heavy ISC. USF infantry upgrades and play very heavy infantry in the late game, or you could go the traditional tech path, go up to Shermans, or like you could go Hellcat and those, or go for a really big chaffy push. All of those are important, viable strategies that we want you to be able to do.
Okay.
As an example.
Cool. Well, thank you for that.
On
diversion.
the spot.
Yeah.
This is live.
This is live. Yeah. Thank you for that diversion, Jason, and for embellishing me. So let's move on to the British forces. What do we do in 215
Sure.
for the Brits?
So Brits are receiving a few minor changes to the main faction. The main one is the Dingo is getting a nerf for its immediate early game. We've noticed that this unit is essentially just really overperforming in team games. While I would say it's doing kind of okay, if not slightly under par in 1v1s, which makes this unit really hard to adjust. Our current attempt is to reduce the vision that it has. Now, a lot of people might not immediately realize what the point of this is, and kind of a rationale is because this thing had 50 sight, which was essentially more than any combat unit in the early game. It could always choose the correct fight. Like you could never really put it into a bad position because you always saw the enemy before they saw you.
Right.
And the intention is by reducing this, it's still slightly more than a base unit, is that it can't really do this as much. So as the opponent, if you know you're playing against a Dingo, you can set up traps for it, or you can set up a good engagement against it. And this would naturally reduce the power of the Dingo without strictly reducing the strength of the unit, especially for 1v1s. But this should be a reduction, and we're giving some of the veterancy back to it. So if you were able to keep your Dingo alive and use it correctly, once you get to Vet 2 and Vet 3, you'll get that back.
Okay.
But right out the gate, that won't be the case.
Okay.
And then kind of some more smaller changes. The Vickers is getting a 5-second reduction because we're noticing those builds are just slightly too weak right now. Opening with the Vickers is meant to be one of the strats of Brits, but it's been consistently kind of underperforming for a lot of different reasons. We don't expect this to fully fix this, but this is to help. And the Bishop, we know we kind of over-nerfed. We did the SPG changes as a class where they're much more vulnerable now. But now we're essentially we also heavily hit the Bishop in particular with its attack speed. So we are reverting the offensive specific nerfs to Bishops, and we're just keeping the SPG changes in place.
Okay. Canadian shock. There's a lot going on here. I know there's been maybe a few complaints about
Yes.
how they've been performing. So let's get into it.
So the Canadians are in a really weird place where in 1v1 they're somewhat dominant. Their numbers are quite good, they're quite popular, and they have good win rate. While in 4v4s or in large team games, they're doing very poorly. Their pick rate is extremely low, and their win rate is not great. It's not that bad, but it's not great. So essentially, we want to buff it in one area, and we want to nerf it in a different. So we're giving it a very significant buff for team games, where now all of its effects will apply to all of its teammates.
Okay. So
it will, when you get the large pulse from attacking spirit or offensive resupply, this will now buff all of your nearby teammates, which is a significant increase in power. At the same time, we've noticed that, for example, the pyro grenades. it is slipping my mind. Sorry. The incendiary munitions, sorry, is getting a command point increase because we're just noticing this is just way too strong early game. It allows you to completely nuke a machine gun. And other things, so we're increasing the CP cost. And a big reduction in its overall power is pyrotechnics essentially had a massive bug under the hood where it was able to apply its debuff up to 3 times on the same unit in
Right,
kind of like a short window. So rather than debuffing it by 20%, we were seeing somewhere up to like 80% of a reduction, which was just massively overkill.
Yeah.
So we're fixing that. And we're also slightly reducing the overall numbers that it has on the speed. And also the tooltip on it was wrong, where it's saying 33% accuracy. It was actually 20%, but also it was kind of 80%. So all of that's being changed. So it's going to be significantly weaker.
Okay.
Whereas the Canadian shock section, I know, has been kind of underused as a unit. We've been very careful not to make this unit too omnipresent, and I think we've been a little too cautious. We're giving a little bit more power back to the unit, where the mortar will now be able to consistently outrange a machine gun, and then now the Piat will be slightly faster. More, I actually forget the exact numbers, but it should be closer to the Panzer Shrek now.
Okay. I did see a question earlier about attacking spirits with regard to like how that pulse works versus I think it was one of the abilities for the DAC that's also a
Yes,
pulse ability.
it's not quite a pulse, it's a aura
Right,
on
it's
a
an aura.
point.
Yeah.
So we know there are some major inconsistencies in the game between large area of effects, whether or not they affect only you or your teammates. This is something where we when we were designing, especially the early content for production, like for launch, we weren't kind of fixed on. So one of the things we're going to be doing as we move on is we're going to be making these mechanics more consistent. Ideally, they should be affecting your teammates. Now, some of these effects were meant to are balanced around the idea that they were specifically for you only. Affecting teammates is obviously a big increase, but it also messes with the balance of like, well, the strength of it in 1v1, well, it's always the same, but in 4v4, if you make it affect teammates, it will be higher or lower. We will be trying our best to essentially adjust this so this is more consistent. If you have an area of affectability, generally we'll try and make it affect teammates, but there are going to be restrictions there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Do we want to get into the Africa Corps?
Yeah, I remember seeing a question about the Brits, but it completely slipped my mind. It's up there somewhere. No, someone mentioned the dingo detection. So the
Right, yeah.
detection radius of the dingo has not changed. This is the sight range. The detection radius of our units is not determined by the sight range. Those are separate, essentially, rings. So those are not changed.
Okay, cool. Let's get into the Africa Corps and all the fun stuff there.
Yeah. So DAC is getting some key both buffs and nerfs. So we do know, again, this faction has consistently been overperforming in team games. The way we've kind of built it and the way players have kind of figured out how to use it is that it's just consistently a stronger faction in the larger modes than it is in the smaller modes. So we're making some adjustments, and we will. This is one of the things where we will be looking at quite much more in 2.2. But essentially, we're reducing kind of the tier 2 timing for especially the 8 rad. So it'll be 5 feel faster. VSL is also going to be easier to get because we did the nerf earlier where you no longer get the 6th man for free. And that was a very significant nerf. That's like, up to like 90 to 100 manpower, depending on how many units you had.
For veteran squad leaders.
Yeah, for veteran squad leaders. Yeah. So we are reducing the cost of that. But kind of some key nerfs for the DAC are going to be the Assault Grenadiers having their duration reduced by 5 seconds. We're noticing these units can just absolutely bully everything on the field the moment they hit, because not only do they have enough time to sprint up to you and then throw grenades at you, but then they can then shoot you as well. And all of that combined essentially allows it to like duel 2 units or even 3 kind of on its own.
Yeah.
So we're toning that back.
I love that ability though. It's so flavorful. like when we put that into the game, I was just like, oh yeah, that just feels right.
Yeah. And that's important to us. Like we want to make sure it's still good, right? But like you're able to sprint out and then still fight for a prolonged period, which is a little bit too much. And then the 250 mortar half track has kind of terrorized team games for a while, and also to a lesser extent 1v1s. With our mortar changes, they are just consistently better against moving targets as well. So this unit has just been able to get a lot of chip value as it's been going. So essentially, it's getting the changes that a lot of the SPGs got, where they're way, way more vulnerable to overall fire. So at 120 health, this essentially means any vehicle can essentially one-shot the vehicle.
Right.
If you get the health upgrades on it, it will be one-shot by things like AT guns, heavy artillery, and the like, but it'll be able to survive 2 shots from vehicles. So that's kind of the target we're going for.
Okay. Martyr?
The Martyr is getting a slight fuel increase, but it's also getting the reduction in veterancy that the other Martyr got.
And the Stug
and the Stug is the same.
Yeah. Okay.
The other change is the Tiger is getting a fuel increase. We're giving it a slight increase of around 24, slight in the sense relative to the cost, but it's a 25 fuel increase. We're basically seeing the Tiger in virtually every 4v4 game. I forget the exact pick rates, but on average, you'll see a Tiger, I believe, once every 2 games. I want to say
Right.
the current stats are, which is just way, way too much for what is supposed to be somewhat of a late game insurance for the faction.
Yeah.
So we're going to be toning this up, and we're going to see how that affects it. If it continues to be such a dominant unit, we're going to continue to add changes to it.
Yeah, and I think that also speaks to like the data that we have access to on our side in terms
Yes.
of like being able to see those pick rates by match, by faction, by
Yeah.
unit type, and then being able to make inferences about like, do we want to see them that often
Yeah.
or not, right?
Yeah. It's a little difficult because it's a lot of information, but at the same time, like sometimes the information is quite obvious, right? Like the Tiger's kind of a one-off here in the sense where like, hey, you're seeing it every game. It's clearly a bit overdone, but there are times where like it's much harder to figure out like what you get from the data. Sometimes a unit can be built quite often, but actually still be underpowered,
Right.
and you can have the opposite where like a really overpowered unit is still being underbuilt because of whatever reason. So stuff like that.
Okay.
And then we have a few minor changes to Subterfuge, giving them the Goliath slightly better camo and the transfer T-boat being slightly better. We're aware that the Subterfuge, like the Canadians, is actually suffering quite a lot. Actually, Subterfuge is suffering much more so than all of the other battle groups in the entire game. It basically, we wanted to fix this, but all the changes we wanted to do were fairly out of scope of a mini patch. So we're essentially not doing. We're going to be doing this later.
Okay. Burses, anything you want to say there?
Yeah. So Bursa's is another example of kind of like a systematic issue. On paper, the unit isn't quite that strong, but players, especially in 1v1, have really broken open just how powerful a 40% sprint can be early on. So our overall intentions is to do further changes to kind of how the battle group plays. But for this patch, especially, the idea is that we want to reduce the speed, because we know, especially at the highest level, this unit is absolutely dominant because it allows players to always get the correct engagement when they want to, where they want to, which just makes the unit overwhelming.
Okay. Did you want to touch on any of the bug fixes or gameplay changes? Because I know there's the pyrotechnics thing.
Yes.
Was there anything else like that you want to bring up?
There's I'm trying to remember.
Like there was the cooldown on the artillery radio beacon.
Right. That bug has been fixed where you used to be able to cheat out essentially extra barrages.
Right.
And that's no longer the case.
Okay.
And I believe no. I'm trying to remember what what went in and what couldn't make it in. The engineers also had a weird issue where they would be able to shoot further range when the minesweeper was
Right.
active.
Yeah.
That's also fixed as well. And then the weird VO bug where sometimes you would hear the paradrop ability, even though you didn't have the ability unlocked, is fixed. So
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know you also had some bigger picture thoughts about the meta and kind of where things are right now. So what did you want to cover off there?
Yeah. So essentially, kind of the final. I think I touched on some of these. We're aware that kind of the state of heavy tanks isn't quite right. In some modes or in some builds, they're too strong or too prominent, and in others, they're a little too hard to get to.
Right.
I know there have been complaints about like, hey, I want to get a heavy tank, but my game is literally ending before I can get one, and stuff like that. We're currently thinking of solutions, but this is a bit of a difficult issue because, like we mentioned before, sometimes stalling, especially in the smaller modes, can be extremely powerful. So we can't allow you to get to the heavy tanks that early. But at the same time, kind of the more obvious solution to some of this is making it just part of tech. But there are some issues with that in the sense that like it's consistently it would make every build the same, right? So we
Right.
want to allow some degree of stalling. Like for example, with the Panther, I think we figured out a kind of a little bit of a balance here where you are able to either stall for it or you are able to directly build it, which allows, because in general, team games struggle with CP costs more than 1v1 does.
Right.
So that's kind of like the issue. Now, we can't use this solution in every place because some of the battle groups don't have that layout, or it's just not ideal to do that setup for everything.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we're going to be looking at that. We talked about kind of USF spam and kind of the role of mainline infantry. We've currently nerfed things like the Stug D, the Whirlwind, and I believe the Scouts as well. So some of their replacements and some of their counters. We're going to be continuing to do this, not in just in terms of nerfs, but essentially making mainline infantry more important. In 1v1s, kind of like the idea of like making their combat role more important, and then in larger team games, making them more important in winning those very game determining like large brawls that kind of happen towards the end of a game, where like everyone's bringing in all their armor and their off maps and everything. And in a lot of these fights, infantry just have no place. They just get absolutely rolled or demolished, and we're gonna look at ways to kind of improve this. So yeah.
Cool. Any other sort of big picture thoughts about like the current state of the meta before we get to some more chat questions?
I think that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So I did see a question about artillery cover. It's sorry, who is this from? Why is artillery cover so weak against fortifications? It doesn't work on fortifications or bunkers at all, and it's so expensive compared to designate targets.
Uh, I need to look at specifically. It's been a minute since I've looked at this ability. I'm trying to remember the exact numbers, but this is one of the units abilities where it's kind of hard to. Yeah, I'll get back to you. This
All
one.
right, we can follow up on Discord or something
Yeah.
like that. So I think that's. I mean, there's a few other questions there.
Mhm.
There's one about matchmaking that I can answer here in a second. Um, yeah, can we scroll down a bit just to sort of see what folks are asking here?
Just scrolling up and down chat.
Just seeing who's got the good questions. Who will be chosen? Are we happy with transfer orders?
Huh. No. No,
Okay.
we're not. In terms of changes, we're still very early in terms of debating what we can do to it in the end. So I don't want to commit to anything by discussion right now, but we are not happy with it.
Okay.
So we can be clear there.
I saw a couple comments about vehicle acceleration, and I know that was something that we've kind of made a few changes
Yeah.
around, sort of ensuring that they're more responsive.
Mm-hmm.
I know that kind of takes away. I mean, there's always that fine balance of
Yes.
like, do you want something that's like realistic,
Mm-hmm.
or do you want something that's like authentic but like gears more towards like responsive gameplay, right? So, how do we feel about the current state of like how vehicles accelerate or move? Yeah, just what are your thoughts?
This one's difficult because overall it's easy to talk about it overall, but I do think in our current game we're suffering from certain units basically being more like some units movement profiles are make this way worse than others. So I think some units do generally benefit from this change. Like the increase in responsiveness is so much that it is worth this kind of change, whereas some of the units I think are more like frustrating to play against or can cause issues because they're so easy to kind of move around. So it's a little difficult to talk about it that generally. That's kind of I guess that's kind of my answer.
Mhm.
Is like there are some specific units that really do benefit from it, and some units that don't. There's also a lot of constraints on our end on just how much we can fiddle with this, because pathing is a very technical system, and it's very easy to be like, you want to fix this case or you want to make it better in this case, and then all of a sudden it makes everything else worse. Now, admittedly, acceleration isn't necessarily pathing, but it does have impacts on like how units respond when going around corners, when they turn, and things like that. So this is really difficult for us to change. We're kind of like thinking on it essentially, like what are some of the potential improvements we can do, but that's to be seen.
Cheerful Capitalist asks, what do you think about the LEIG Vet 1 ability? Do you think this unit needs a veterancy pass like other units have received?
There are still quite a few abilities and units in the game that still require unit uniqueness pass. And this is probably one candidate. I don't want to be promising too much here, but like we are currently still looking at units. Both the veterancy is still fairly new. Like we rolled out that system last year, and then and all of the modifiers, and then unit abilities have been a little bit of a mess since launch, but we've slowly improved them. The LEG one is probably one of the candidates, but I don't think I can promise anything yet.
Okay. I saw a couple questions about matchmaking, and I think I can maybe speak to that because I've answered this in a few other places. But we know there can sometimes be a disparity or some frustration around auto match and matchmaking in terms of team composition or like the disparity in skill level between players on the same team or opponents. That's a very tricky problem to solve. It's a very complicated problem. It's something that we're very aware of and something that we're hoping to spend more time on in the future. It's kind of slowly creeping up in terms of priority, but it's just a matter of like getting the time for specific individuals to really take a look at that system and see what's possible. I think there's a few contributing factors. Like one is obviously like player pool, right? Like what is the number of concurrent players at this exact moment in time that I'm pushing the matchmake button in the game modes that I have selected in the appropriate factions, whether it be opponents and players. So the more variables you add onto that equation, the harder and harder it gets in terms of like, it's looking at a more narrow field. But then we also have to balance that across like how long will the average person wait before they just quit out entirely, right? So how much time can we have for that very narrow band of parameters before we start to expand those parameters a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, until we actually find a match for those people that are all matchmaking at the same time within those given parameters. So that can be tricky, right? And like the longer someone waits, like it's not ideal for the player experience. So there's a few things that we could do to solve that, like overnight, like tell 100,000 of your friends to start playing multiplayer, and that would probably fix that pretty quick. I think another component of that is a lot of players will look at like the concurrent numbers of players on Steam, but that's not who's playing multiplayer, right? Like that's everyone playing the game regardless of the mode. So there's a large component of like or a large contingent of single player folks that are only touching campaign, that are only touching skirmish, that doesn't equate into that concurrent number. I think the other thing that we could do is we could just turn off certain game modes. Like we could turn off 1v1 and 4v4 overnight, and the matchmaking in 2v2 and 3v3 would be much better, so like that's again, that's a bad idea. Like we wouldn't do that. That's a really bad idea.
Yes.
But I think that's an example of like some of the levers you could potentially pull if you wanted to have like a quick and dirty solution to this. So that's I guess my point is it's not necessarily an easy solve. So it is a more complicated problem, and the team is very aware of it, and we're looking at it and trying to figure out like what's the best way that we could approach this. Yes, don't give me the keys to the matchmaking, because I'm just going to take away the game modes that you like. It's 3v3s for everyone. All the rest of the game modes go away.
The 3v3 player.
Just nothing but 3v3s. Love me a good 3v3. Okay. I saw some other questions about 2.2 and the new battle groups. Was there anything else in terms of the today's balance patch that we wanted to touch on. I guess like more generally, I saw a couple kind of questions that hint at this. Like, are with 2-2, will you be looking at doing a balanced passive of any of the other battle groups in tandem with launching the 4 new ones?
Oh, for 2-2, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
will you
yeah.
be doing a passive like some of the existing battle groups?
Yes. We're like every major patch, we're going to be doing some battle group changes. As we we're there's quite a few like subterfuge, for example, where like we're aware it's currently suffering from some major issues. It's generally just not that easy, or not like just straight up not possible for us to make a lot of these adjustments in between patches. There's a lot of restrictions on what we can actually roll into a balance pass, essentially reasonably. So we don't do them then, but generally, when we get to a major patch, we try our best to fixate, or fix, not fixate, but I guess both
Yeah.
these issues.
Okay. Looney asks if there was anything that you wanted to do in this patch that had to get moved out.
Oh, there's a few. I mean, I think I hinted at a few of them. Like, we definitely wanted to give USF barracks a little bit more, or like basically different changes than what they currently had. But I don't think we were able to essentially do them, because essentially any changes to main lines we do very, very, very carefully, because we know this affects every matchup in every mode, and this starts from the start of the game, which can impact everything else, right? The moment one faction can get more of an advantage early, that means their mid game is then faster or better, which then means their late game is faster and better. So like mainline changes, or like essentially changes to the early techs, is very, very expensive, or like very time consuming for us, because it's not a matter of like, okay, if you I don't know, riflemen get 10 more cost, right? Like, that's not a good example. 10 less cost. Well, what does that mean? Well, we need to go through essentially every matchup and play them, make sure that, hey, this actually has the effect we want. Because like there are a lot of times where there are indirect consequences that don't seem very obvious.
Yeah.
So like an anecdote from like way back before launch was like, we reduced the cost of grenadiers quite a lot, and all this meant was that you could build a ton of grenadiers, sit on them, and then go straight to a Panzer IV, right? So even though we only buffed the grenadier slightly, it meant you stopped building the entire tech tree. So you would go straight up to tier 4. So that was really bad. Now that's a bit of an extreme example, but like this is why like changes to early techs are so conservative, especially in these mini patches, because the we don't want to create like essentially a new giant problem.
Okay. Kenny asks, have you given any thought to tuning area of effect suppression versus suppression dealt to individual squads?
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes units that aren't too close to each other are still hit by the AoE.
That actually touches on another change that we weren't able to do in this patch. Is essentially changes to machine guns. Machine guns are kind of in a weird place where some of them are a little too strong. So, like the USF MG is a good example, but in general, in some ways they're also weak. It does vary. In some game modes or in some maps they're quite strong, and in some they're quite weak. Like for example, the DAC machine gun probably is hurting quite a bit in terms it's not seeing that much play, and it's not quite that strong. Its ability is a little lacking, for example. So there were quite a few changes that we discussed for machine guns in general that we wanted to do. There have been discussions about like, what about the setup time? The mortar change that we did earlier kind of shifted the power a lot on the machine guns as well. And obviously, for example, the American machine gun is heavily defined by all of the strategies that support it. So the strength of scouts, the strength of the bazooka team, and the 75 mil all affect how good the American machine gun is, essentially. So we're not quite happy with how these are right now, but like again, I don't think we weren't able to really adjust all of these.
Okay. What's your favorite faction? Do you have a favorite, or are they all your favorite?
They're all my
children?
babies now.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of have I generally have like a faction of the month.
Yeah.
And then I kind of alternate between them. So I don't know. Something I was playing quite a lot before was like what, Brits, and I believe, what was it? It was Canadians. I was trying my best to make them work in team games, for example. So yeah.
My favorite faction, I don't have a favorite. It's usually like when I'm playing, it's because I need to like test something new or like be like, oh, what are these new battle groups all about?
Mhm.
Or I'm trying to capture specific footage for something. So yeah, I don't really have a favorite. That again, they're all our special children. Um, but yeah, I think that I think we're kind of coming up to time here,
Mhm.
Jason. I did see some questions about obviously the big update coming in the fall,
Mhm.
2.2. So what can we say about that? A lot of people are asking for the date. We're not going to give it to you, but what I will say, it is coming. We're targeting late fall.
Mhm.
So take that or make of that what you will. Apologies to those in the southern hemisphere. So that would be like you know late spring for them. Is
It's
that
inverted, right?
yeah? Late fall?
Yours is
No.
showing.
Yeah. Okay. Late spring for them. Late fall for us. Um, what else? Obviously, we'll sort of have all of our bug fixes, feature work, balance changes, and of course 4 new battle groups. We'll reveal those and talk about those more as we get closer to that date. So we're not going to sort of spoil anything here. But what I think we can maybe talk about, Jason, is the fact that we're actively playtesting those battle groups.
Mhm.
A bunch of the icons just went in for them, so those look really great for the tech trees and stuff. We also just did a private playtest with several players with the new battle groups.
Mhm.
So I think like, what would be your high level thoughts coming out of that playtest without revealing what the battle groups are, and without revealing
Oh
any of the
boy,
units or abilities?
this is unscripted,
Yeah.
guys.
So like what was sort of your takeaway from like what they just tested and sort of the general feeling or consensus about the new battle group pack?
um,
Like did they like it? I guess is a better question.
I think they liked it.
Okay.
I'm very excited to see how the community will use them
Hmm.
because, like, man, so many of the mechanics we've built or some of the units we've built were like here when we put them out, and then people have just found all kinds of weird ways to kind of make the most out of them in all kinds of weird and interesting ways. We're getting more accustomed to designing around this now, I would say, than originally. So I do think our new battle groups probably will give more room for that.
Hmm.
So that'll be cool.
Yeah.
More work for me.
Yeah. I will say the one of the interesting things about the private playtest we did is that players kind of identified some issues with the U.S. forces battle group in terms of like, hey, this needs a little bit more love. You know what I mean? I'm trying to be very vague, but like, I think the idea and the concept for the battle group is very cool. It's
Mhm.
something new. It's something that we haven't seen before in Company of Heroes, I think.
Yes.
But some of the feedback was like, hey, this is cool, but it needs a little bit more juice. Like it
Yeah.
needs a little bit more time in the oven. So I think that's what we're actively kind of doing right
Yep.
now, right?
It's a bit of a crazy one.
Yeah. So aside from that, I did also see some questions about like roadmap and where we're kind of going from there. Um, again, what I can say is like I was talking to Denise, one of our producers here
Hmm.
on the project, about what we're doing for or at least what we're planning for 2026, 2027. So there's a lot of fun stuff in store, and I think the plan is to get a public facing roadmap out around probably the time that the 2.2 update goes out, and that will probably at least lay out the next 4 to 6 months after that.
Okay.
And we'll obviously try and update those as we go along, and those plans become more solid. Um, any final thoughts, Jason, on 215? I know people are already playing it and getting into it. So
Now they're all thinking about the new battle groups.
I know. Sorry, just like no. This is about 215. This is not about 2.2. Okay.
uh,
There's no new battle groups coming out. We're
yeah.
just focused on
I
today.
was panicking a little. It's like, wait, what is he talking about now? All right, okay.
Yeah, 215. I think it's a good patch, just kind of
Yeah.
like tie things over until we get to 2.2.
Hmm.
Not rocking the boat too much, but kind of adjusting the meta appropriately.
Hmm. Yeah. Like again, this is meant to be a bit of a defensive like bounce pass. We want to make it so that the most dominant stuff should see are all seeing major reductions in power, and hopefully some of the other strategies can flourish. So that's kind of our hope.
Okay, cool. So I think we can maybe end things there. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. As always,
Mhm.
please let us know your feedback on 215. As always, if you're encountering
We'll
any
be looking.
issues, Yeah, we're keeping an eye on it. If you're encountering any issues or bugs, please report those to help.relic.com by making a new request there. And of course, you can follow all of our social channels at Company of Heroes to stay up to date with what we're doing. You can also join our Discord, discord.gg/relic entertainment, to chat with other players, find people to play with, and even chat with the dev team. And I think that's going to do it for today. So thanks so much, Jason. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you folks next time.